In 2014, researchers at the University of Virginia placed several hundred people, one at a time, into an empty room. No phone, no book, no window, just a chair and a button wired to a small electric shock generator. The instructions were simple. Sit there for 15 minutes. Do nothing. If the silence became unbearable, you were allowed to press the button instead. 67% of the men pressed it. So did a quarter of the women. Several pressed it more than once. They knew exactly what they were choosing. Pain over nothing. Your brain spent 300,000 years learning what to do with empty time. Hunting required long stretches of stillness. Foraging required waiting without reward. Grief, mourning, the slow seasons between harvests, all of it demanded a mind that could sit inside nothing and not break. Evolution did not build a mind that panics in silence. It built a mind that uses silence to think. Somewhere in the last 15 years, that relationship quietly ended. What replaced it wasn't peace. It was something that looked like relief and behaved like the opposite. Ask most people why they reach for their phone the moment a line gets long or a meeting goes quiet, and the answer is almost universal. Boredom is uncomfortable. The phone makes it go away. This feels like common sense, and for most of human history, the discomfort of boredom was treated exactly that way, as a problem to be solved, not a process to be respected. The science of boredom tells a different story, but psychology took a long time to take the feeling seriously enough to actually define it. In 2012, a team led by John Eastwood at York University published a paper attempting to do exactly that. They defined boredom not as the absence of stimulation, but as the uncomfortable experience of wanting to engage with something meaningful and being unable to. Boredom, by their account, is not empty. It is a signal. It is the mind telling you that whatever you are currently doing is not worth your attention and that something better is required of you. 2 years later, Harvard psychologists Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert tracked the daily experience of more than 2,000 adults using a phone-based sampling method, pinging them at random hours and asking what they were thinking about in that exact instant. Their conclusion, published in the journal Science, was blunt. People spend nearly half of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they are doing. And across nearly every single activity measured, this wandering made them less happy, not more. The mind, left alone, does not relax. It searches. That same year, radio host Manoush Zomorodi ran a public experiment called Bored and Brilliant, asking thousands of listeners to put their phones away during the in-between moments of the day. The queues, the commutes, the waiting rooms, the parts of life evolution had quietly reserved for the mind to idle, and that the smartphone had quietly colonized without anyone voting on it. What she found lines up with something stranger than discomfort. The participants did not just feel less anxious. Many of them reported their best ideas arriving during those empty stretches, the very stretches they had spent years trying to eliminate with a feed, a game, a notification. This is the part of the story the design industry already understood before the public did. B.J. Fogg, running the Persuasive Technology Lab at Stanford, spent years training a generation of engineers to treat the gap between a thought and a phone check as a problem with an engineering solution. Remove the friction. Shorten the gap. Make the reach automatic. The goal was never to make people happier in that gap. The goal was to make sure the gap never lasted long enough for anything to happen inside it. If boredom is simply bad, a defect to be patched over with dopamine, none of what Zomorodi found should be possible. A defect does not produce insight. So either millions of years of evolution kept a malfunction around for no reason, or boredom was never the problem in the first place, and an entire industry built its business model on convincing you that it was. The engineering did not stop at removing friction. The newest systems do not wait for you to reach for them. Recommendation engines trained on billions of viewing sessions now predict the exact moment your attention is about to drift. and serve the next piece of content before the drift has time to become a thought. The gap Fogg's lab once tried to shorten has, in the space of a decade, been closed almost entirely. There is no longer a wait. There is only a queue, refilling itself faster than you can empty it. It wasn't the problem. It was the precursor. In 2014, researchers Sandy Mann and Rebecca Cadman at the University of Central Lancashire ran a simple experiment. They gave one group of participants a deliberately boring task, copying numbers from a phone book, before asking everyone to invent creative uses for a plastic cup. The bored group generated more original ideas than the group that skipped straight to the creative task. Boredom wasn't blocking creativity. It was loading it. Here is what nobody tells you about the discomfort you feel in empty time. That discomfort is not a malfunction. It is the opening phase of a process neuroscientists call incubation, the same process behind nearly every documented case of sudden insight in the history of science and art. The mind needs unstructured time to let unrelated information collide without supervision. No input, no task, no algorithm deciding what comes next. Just space, and the friction of nothing to do with it. And this is where the story flips. You think the compulsive reaching for your phone is the symptom, and the inability to focus is the disease. It is the other way around. The compulsive reaching is the disease. The inability to sit alone with your own mind, inside the exact state it evolved to use for solving problems, is the actual injury. The distraction is not curing the discomfort of an empty mind. It is interrupting the empty mind before it can finish the job it was already doing. Every notification answered during a moment of boredom is an unfinished thought, deleted before it had the chance to become anything. Not lost. Not postponed. Deleted the way a draft disappears when the power cuts before you save it. Multiply that across a generation that has nearly eliminated unstructured time. And you are not looking at a few interrupted thoughts. You are looking at a civilization quietly losing access to its own incubation process, the same mechanism that produced its art, its mathematics, its solutions to problems that never had obvious answers. The great leaps did not come from people who were never bored. They came from people who had nowhere else to put their attention, and so their attention turned inward and stayed there long enough to find something. Nobody decided to make boredom extinct. No company held a meeting to plan the deletion of empty time. It simply became unprofitable to leave a single second of human attention unfilled. And so, second by second, platform by platform, it wasn't. The elimination of boredom was never the goal stated in any boardroom. It was simply the most reliable byproduct of a business model that gets paid for every second it keeps you somewhere else. The mice in the overcrowded enclosures studied decades ago didn't choose to lose the instincts that once defined them. They simply ran out of room for the behaviors that required it, generation after generation, until the room and the instinct disappeared together. Nobody removed the instinct on purpose. The room just kept shrinking until there was nowhere left to perform it. And a few generations later, the behavior was simply gone, with no event marking its disappearance. There is no equivalent study yet for what a species does when the unstructured 15 minutes disappear from its day, generation after generation, replaced by a feed that never runs out. The experiment is running anyway. It has been running for about 15 years, on billions of people who never agreed to participate, and the only data coming back so far is anecdotal. People who say they can no longer read a book for more than a few pages. People who say a quiet car ride now feels unbearable. People who cannot remember the last original thought they had that didn't start as someone else's content. You still have room. Nobody is taking the 15 minutes away from you. You are just never being given the chance to notice they're still there, sitting underneath the next scroll, waiting for you to stop long enough to find them. You know something now that you cannot unknow. Most people will close this video and reach for their phone within the next 10 seconds. A few will sit with the silence instead, just to see what shows up.